But tonight's topic is great because flipping, as you and I know, flipping is earned income, no different than having a job, right? No different than whether you're a contractor or you're an agent or you're, just rehabbing. It's all earned income. And I'm very passionate about helping people get on the other side of that, which is what I call now the income flip, right? How do you convert that earned income into passive income? And so one of the ways to do that, we're going to talk about tonight, how to buy and hold real estate, right? Because that's what we do. We'll talk about, we've got all of our PowerPoint presentations, but the way Mark and I always love to kind of talk through these things is through stories, and we love to make it interactive. So what we want to do is hear from you guys that are online, right? Taylor and Piper and Roger and Dorothy and Katya and CJ and Chris and Gerald, right? Jad, Michael, all of you guys, we believe that the real learning happens when there's collaboration and discussion around these topics. And even if you're just here to just listen and observe, that's cool too. Like, we're going to go through the room real fast and we'll just do a quick intros. In fact, Mark, why don't we just start that off? It's already 7:08, so we might as well just do that. Do some basic intros for everybody online. And we'll see if anybody's brave enough to come online. But I think we've trained everybody to do it online, right? So
we live from the room online.
Online until we'll have to do like private masterminds or something with people that come in.
It goes back inside.
But who are you? Introduce yourself.
So, hi, everybody. Mark Beckett. So Rob and I have known each other since 2009. So a little over 10 years we've been doing various things. I run CAZA Construction and do some of our rehab projects for both our own portfolio and for clients.
Hang on one sec. Jack, can you see Mark, by the way?
We're working on our camera angle. I was in the shot.
Yeah, or Erica or Michael. I just want to somebody unmute themselves and be like, yes, I can see Mark Beckett.
Yes, I can see Mark.
Okay,
Hi.
good.
Good evening.
See Mark?
We see him.
Good.
Good to be seen.
I know. I just want to make sure.
Good to be seen.
Because I can't see whether or not you guys are seeing or not. Okay, go on.
So CAZA Construction and our rehab and investing division. Occasionally buy and holds also, have a couple of those. I think I started off as a rehabber, right? Just buying, renovating, and selling. Then got the rental properties after kind of learning a little bit about what the house ought to look like when it's fixed up for sale grade, for rental grade, and just a little bit more of how the numbers work and what a good deal is. We're going to talk about that, kind of how some of the numbers play out, and what is or might appear to be, but might not yet be a really good income property deal. And then after learning that, then we started to get into the construction bit as we accumulated good people to kind of do work on our properties. And that's a whole nother business and topic for you tonight. But really enjoy rehabbing. I enjoy the process of ripping a house apart, putting it back together, doing the selections, doing the design. I find that entertaining. But Rob, as you said, really the way that you wake up in 20 years wealthy is to accumulate and not sell. And honestly, if I had never sold a single house we ever did, I'd probably be retired already. So the only deals that you end up regretting those times are the ones that you sell and don't keep, because over time, as we know, real estate is a great accumulator.
Sure.
So,
and just want to say real fast, Mark started in this room in 2007,
7 or 8.
Seven was when Mark was that really, really smart person in the room, asking lots of great questions. And then a couple of years later, we partnered together and started doing a lot of the investment stuff. So for those that don't know, my name is Rob Chevez. I feel blessed to help facilitate this group along with Mark Beckett. I've been running this since 2007. We love pouring into you guys, into the community to help you build wealth through real estate. It's one of the best ways that we know how to do it. And we love talking shop about different topics every single month. Tonight's topic is about how to buy and hold investment property, and everybody's always asking, hey, can you even buy and hold property right now? Because buying and holds is so difficult. Everything is so, highly priced. So we're going to talk a little bit about the market, about what we're seeing in the market. I run the CAZA Group. We do around 300 transactions a year. We have a property management division. We have an investment division, a construction division, a title division, soon to be mortgage. So we love real estate. We're into real estate. This is all things real estate, right? What I want to do is introduce you guys to each other. So what I want you to do, if you're brave enough, is just, get off cam or, put the camera on, introduce yourself, say, hey, my name is Chris. I'm new to the business, or I'm experienced. What's that? Oh, or you could just comment in the chat, right? You can put in the chat, hey, this is who I am. This is what I look for. I'm brand new. I'm learning. I'm a wholesaler. I'm a rehabber. Just so that you can learn and meet other people, which is the whole reason why we do this, guys. Like, yes, we want to give you information about how to do deals, but we want you guys to learn from each other and network with each other. So if you want to just very quickly, I would call a 10-second elevator pitch, feel free to do it, or you could put it in the chat with your contact info. So Alvina, go ahead. You look like you're going to be brave and do it.
Ready. Yeah. Hi, my name is Alvina, and my business is Royal Home Properties. I'm here in Virginia in Falls Church, and I started business in 2019 September. Started getting education, and then I purchased my first property in March 2020. It was a row townhome in DC. And I worked with JV partner because, I was new and had no experience. So we successfully completed that project and sold it last November. And now I am working in few projects in Richmond. So I'm rehabbing currently. But Rob, right?
Yes.
I would like to talk to you also because I have a private money lender and he's interested in buying real estate rentals.
Great.
So if you have time, we can also speak later.
100%. And by the way, I'll put into the chat, if I can figure out how to do this. Mark, maybe you can put my contact info. Oh, you're not watching. Put my email and everything into the chat. Let me see if I can do it.
So my goal is I don't want to rehab. It's not easy. It's really stressing. And to buy and hold and do buy apartment buildings and multifamily and syndication, all that. But I feel like I'm still very new and I need a lot of education. I do have education, but I need to learn more and
Awesome.
I think get more experience.
Well, Vino, welcome. What I would recommend is that you put your info in the chat as well, right?
Okay. Yeah.
We believe that the power is in the relationships that you form, right, all around you, whether it's in the room or online now, right? So welcome you guys for showing up online. We've got some brave souls that decided that, look, they're going to come in face to face and we'll do some private masterminding with them.
I wanted to come, but then I saw that you have only 10 people. You want to come. Attend in person.
So CJ commented, CJ said he's a beginner, right? Hey, I'm a beginner trying to learn from successful people. Great. You've got Alvina here to help you, right? And you got Mr. Mark Beckett. So welcome, CJ. Anybody else? Feel free to, put on your cams, introduce yourself real fast, or at a minimum, please put your contact information in the chat.
Hi, everybody. I'm Piper Holloway at Fix and Flip. I like to buy and hold. That's why I definitely am make certain I'm on this call today. Because the property that I actually have now, it's on South Dakota Avenue Northeast, DC. This will be my fourth flip. The other ones have been pretty good, but this is a nightmare for me. For whatever reason, I needed an expediter and have not been able to get an expediter. If someone knows a good expediter, I definitely.
Facebook group? We're in Facebook group?
Yeah, you think I should just put it out there?
Oh, yeah.
You definitely put up, you were looking for a recommendation for a DC expediter. I guarantee you.
Okay, then that's what I'll do. I'll put it out there. But so right now I'm waiting for my building permit to come in. I've never seen where they wanted a kitchen plan before, so I don't know if this is something crazy or new, but this is the first time they've asked for that. And then I'm thinking after the house collapsed on Kennedy Street, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're probably so strict now, but I'm a whole month behind due to not having a expediter that could do it. I had someone put it in, and for whatever reason, I could see it on Scout, but DCRA kept saying that they could not find the submitted material. So I ended up having to do a postcard. I just went and did the postcard so that I can get things moving. So with that in mind, I had already had intentions of doing a rental. Then I said, I'll just fix and flip since this market is so hot and crazy. But I think I like to look at the long run, and based on whatever you tell us today, I'll see whether or not I can turn this into rental property.
Turn that lemon into lemonade. Okay, that's what we're gonna
Lemonade,
do. Let's do
lemon
it.
meringue. Thank
Michael,
you.
that sounds great. Alvina put her contact information in there. Anybody else before we get started? Okay. We've got Mike Capello.
Hi.
Michelle. Okay, so we're gonna get started. You guys want to introduce yourselves? This is how we normally do it when we're live, right? So go ahead, introduce yourself real fast. Mhm. Mhm.
Hey, Rob, we can't hear them.
Okay, I will help translate. He's just introducing himself real fast, just saying he's been appraising homes for 20 years. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just 15 minutes away from here, so I come in, and I am just really now interested in just the full spectrum, trying to explore, blind fold or blind flip,
Got it.
everything.
Okay.
Check it out because I feel like I've got this asset where I am wanting to pretty much every nook and cranny for the appraisal assignments again, and I always go right when the deals where it just happened, and I do the numbers and I'm like, what I should do.
Yeah, so he's been appraising houses for the last 20 years, and he's been watching a lot of these before and afters, right? He'll go in, he'll see what they bought it for, he'll see what it sold for, he's doing the math, and he's like, okay, I need to get into this. And I'm in every neighborhood, I'm seeing what's happening in the marketplace, and I need to get more involved on this investment side. So welcome, thank you for coming. Go ahead.
Hi, Rob. Nearby as well. In the process of the program.
Awesome.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Rob, that's actually
Yeah. Okay.
So we're almost there, 3 more weeks, but I'm just.
So Alex expanded his search and bought his first rental property in Baltimore, right? And or you're about to close on it. And that's a whole nother animal. We're gonna talk about that tonight, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly. But congrats on taking action and making that happen, right? The thing I want to tell you guys is let's talk a little bit before we go into the topic deep about the market, right? What are we seeing in the marketplace right now? So, inventory is still low, but we are seeing some inventory climbing in certain areas, right? Still getting multiple contracts in the majority of all of our properties. It does feel like a little bit of a summertime seasonality, which wasn't as crazy as it was in the beginning of the year, although it's still super strong. Right property, right price, still moving very quickly, right? Lots of competition for investment properties, which makes it very difficult to find, buy and hold assets in this area. Although I'm seeing people buying, in the Shenandoah Valley for Airbnbs. We're seeing in Baltimore. We're seeing in some of the outskirt markets like Hagerstown. It always happens, by the way. That happened in 2005 when the market was crazy here. People started pushing to some of the outskirt markets. And then, those come with their own challenges. One of the things we're going to talk about, and we'll go through the slides, is that there's different markets, right? There is growth markets and there's cash flow markets. And we're in a growth market. in this market, right? There's not a lot of cash flow here, but there's been a lot of appreciation. And there always has been consistent, but there are markets in places like Ohio or Cumberland or different markets where there's not a lot of appreciation, but there's cash flow if you know which ones to buy, right? So, Mark, you want to play with this real fast? Make sure, I don't know if this is sharing, right?
There you go.
Okay,
Actually go to that one.
I'm gonna go to this one right here.
Yeah. All right, so hopefully everybody can now see the screen online.
Can you guys see that?
Maybe holler if you can.
We can see it.
All right, excellent. All
We
right.
see it. We
Awesome.
see it.
So we already did the intros, right? We're gonna go. We've already kind of gone through this piece. Legal stuff is, hey guys, do your own due diligence. Anybody you meet here, vet them out, right? This is just, we are practitioners in the field doing deals all day long, but you should always do your own due diligence in any deal that you do, right? Vet anybody that you meet in this group. So what is buy and hold, Mr. Beckett?
Yeah, so we call this discussion is income property, right? And we call them rental properties. I like to think of them as income properties because I want there to be a focus on income, not just owning this thing and renting it out for the sake of having it. You can make money several ways owning real estate long term. The three easiest are as the property appreciates in value over time, as the loan balance that you may have on it gets paid off, preferably by a tenant, right? Not using your money. And then best of all, with the delta from what that tenant pays minus whatever you might owe on a loan, other holding costs, taxes, management, insurance, whatever else, should hopefully leave you some income, right? At the end of the day, every month, if not more frequently than that, that actually goes in your pocket as income. So thinking of buy and hold or rental property as income property, I think is kind of an important mental shift.
Sure.
It's still a long game. It's still going to take a portfolio of some size.
Fit fast.
We're clearly not get rich quick gurus here, right? There are no books and tapes for sale in the back of the room on how to do this and make $1 million in the next 30 days. But you can, and you can over time, depending on the size of the portfolio and the property that you're going after. And we'll talk about that in a second also. You don't have to just buy those small onesie-twosie properties. It still will take some time to accumulate real cash flow, but you can, in a not too long period of time, accumulate cash flow that you will live off of, that will replace a job, replace another income. That's what's so monumentally good about real estate, even if you don't get the appreciation, even if you don't do all the other good things you can do by owning and appreciating holding property. Just having the income is wonderful.
I would say we just paid off our 5th house, so paid for free and clear. This partner of ours and I started buying. We bought properties in 2008 during the last foreclosure crisis, and we've just been gradually over that time paying these properties off. And so, you wake up, you think, wow, like 12, 13 years, a long time. You wake up and it's like, it just goes by like that, right? It goes by super fast. And then they just start snowballing, right? They just start snowballing. So, when they're all paid off, that'll be like $17,000 in cash flow that comes in, right, from those assets. But it didn't happen overnight, right? They bought one, we were disciplined with it, pay them off over time. You don't really make money on those in a growth market like we're in, like cash flow wise. They essentially pay for themselves, and any additional money that you get, you start tossing it towards paying down those assets, right? Now, there's lots of investors that are going to be out there and say, hey, why do you want to pay them off? Why not leverage them up, buy more assets? Well, it depends. There's different buckets of money, right? This is what I call kind of like our FU money, right? If hell was to come in a handbasket, if something was to happen, the market was to crash, it doesn't matter to us, right? Because the assets are paid off and the income, what do you think rents are going to go up? Do you think rents are going to go down? Or do you think rents are going to go up? Right?
But Rob, the biggest thing is that you're missing is that once they're paid off, you can get a credit line against them.
100%.
So, I mean, you can get like, and then now you're leveraging. So now you're getting paid off the asset, and you're able to borrow money at like 4%, and then you're making more money.
As long as you know how to create great arbitrage, right? Because can you lose money? Of course. Yeah, of course.
No, not if you're not Rob Chevez.
Rob Chevez and perhaps the not best rentals in the world, if you're willing.
Sure.
Because we don't talk necessarily about this. We talk about how some of the numbers work, how to determine what the return is on your money in a bit. But how do you determine where you're going to buy your rental income property, right? Different parts of the world are not all created equal. So in my opinion, I prefer to stick relatively close to an area that I know. At least I have some familiarity with economic and population drivers. And those to me are the two biggest things that determine long-term rental value. Not even necessarily the long-term real estate value. They probably do go hand in hand, but like I said, even if I don't get massive appreciation in the underlying asset, as long as the income is stable and maybe going up every year, if the rents are stable and rising, then we should probably be pretty happy. But in order for that to happen, you need a market that is stable from an economic standpoint and a population standpoint. And I think those two things kind of go hand in hand. If an area is growing in population, it's probably because it has a decent underlying economy, right? Employment base. Conversely, if it's not, if the population is not growing, then there's probably a reason. And if you can't suss out why, don't expect areas that are becoming less popular to suddenly become.
Well, Jed, I'm sure you saw that video that I posted, or like I posted on Facebook, the house where I was trying to figure out, should I tear it down and make it a parking lot? Should I donate it to the city, right? Like, what should I do with this property that I own that has not gone up in value? It's not on a great street. One of the things you got to worry about in Baltimore, right? And the tenants, that this property attracts have destroyed it over a decade.
So how did you get there? Where is this property and why do you think it has those?
Well, this area is in one of those economically challenged markets like Cumberland, Maryland, right? Now, there's ways to make money in Cumberland and there's ways to lose money in Cumberland. I definitely did a way to lose money, which was buy on a bad street, over improve the property, and then, over the last 10 to 12 years, that asset has not gone up in value, and yet the tenant turnover in that neighborhood has just crushed that asset to the point where, like, I'm now thinking it's easier for me to shut the building down.
No, Rob.
Yeah, hands up.
No, Rob. Okay, Rob. Rob is making the classic mistake. What Rob should have done is find a voucher tenant. Voucher tenants usually don't, very low turnover, your money's guaranteed. But Rob wasn't patient enough to wait for a voucher tenant. That was
in the last decade, I've had plenty of voucher tenants in this property, right?
100% vouchers, like no partial?
100% vouchers. I've had 100% vouchers in this property.
And there's still turnover?
Yeah, for the first 5 years, it was good, right? And then what happens is even a voucher tenant will go in and, like, unfortunately not always keep the property to its best and optimal condition. And then what happens is this, Chad, right now, if you have to turn over one of your properties and you look at it and you say, hey, it's not a big deal, right? My asset has gone up, $100,000 in the last 5 years. Well, you're like, wow, my asset hasn't gone up at all in the last 5 years,
and why
10 years. Because, to go back to your conversation, right, the employer base there is low. The population growth is declining. It's not increasing. So it's one of the key metrics that you need to look at when you want to buy into a market. Is that market growing, right? Is population growth going? Are jobs coming in, or are people fleeing, right, from that? So
the short take is just because it's cheap doesn't make it a deal, right?
That's right. Sometimes people go, wow, it's so cheap. Look, that duplex is only $50,000, right? And I've got a good one in Cumberland that's bought a duplex for $50,000 15 years ago. Guess what it's worth today? $50,000 today. Yes, right. And guess what that roof costs?
Because that market is not growing. It is losing population. It's not.
Mhm.
People are leaving.
People are
So
leaving.
there are parts of the world, Detroit, Buffalo, Cumberland, that aren't growing in population. Their economy isn't expanding. It's not expanding. What could possibly raise the underlying real estate? If you've ever flown across, you got a lot of space out there. There's plenty of, not a shortage of real estate in this country. There's a shortage of well-located real estate around major geographic centers where people want to live and where they can work and where they can raise a family safely and where they can feel comfortable and safe and all those other things. That's where you want to make sure you're trying to buy your long-term property in one of those places where the population is at least steady, preferably growing. So that would be my biggest takeaway for a rental market. Just look at population. Economic factors, but at least be looking for population growth year over year, because if it's not, it's probably.
Now, if Elon Musk in his quest to take over the world and creates, does a tunnel from DC to Cumberland, who knows, that thing could grow really fast, right? It might take 10 minutes to get to DC, and then you would see those outer skirt markets, people saying, well, shoot, my commute's only 10 minutes in that bullet train, right? It's a question, so go ahead, speak up, and then I'll.
I'm Matt, the nearest hub to Cumberland, Maryland.
Hagerstown, probably the next biggest area is Hagerstown from Cumberland, right?
Which actually I like. I've been to Hagerstown recently, and there are things going on. There are signs of growth. I don't even have to go to population growth to know when you see power centers being built, brand new Targets going up, brand new grocery stores going in, new schools being built, new roads being made. Something is happening there that is driving growth. So you don't have to do a lot of research other than just going to a place and getting a feel for it or finding a way to get that information. I'm not saying that you shouldn't invest in other parts of the country. There are plenty of people who do way better than I do buying rental properties in Ohio, in the Carolinas, in Florida, and in Texas. There are a lot of great markets that are less expensive than a major metro like DC, where it is hard to find income property where you can still buy property that cash flows make sense. But wherever that town is, get that information however you can on at least whether or not its population is growing. Because if it's not, and there's no other underlying thing coming or happening that might change that around,
you know what's interesting?
I'd argue you're in a bad market.
I was just thinking, is there a Starbucks in Hagerstown?
Oh, multiple.
Multiple. There's no Starbucks in Cumberland.
No, yeah.
I just want to say, right? Now, guess what? There's a really mean Taco Bell. Taco Bell does really well there, right? So you start thinking of like some of these, Taco Bell does well, Roy Rogers does well.
Dollar Store.
I like that correlation.
Yeah, right.
We call this the Chevez correlation. If there's a Starbucks in your town, you can at least consider it.
Yeah.
No Starbucks.
I don't know. Yeah. Oh, no, there's actually
Cumberland has a Chick-fil-A.
that's a good one too.
You can't go by Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
Not good enough.
Chick-fil-A is good.
Great.
Yeah.
Not an economic.
Anyhow, maybe that was the sign that things are turning there. That's the optimist in me saying there's Chick-fil-A.
So that's one of the things that this slide is talking about. Considerations for buying home versus fix and flip are different. Fix and flip, all I need to see is that one other person has bought and sold a property for more than they put into it, look like it maybe made money. I can probably stand a reasonable chance of doing that too in that 3 to 6 month window that we want to be in a fix and flip for. Buying home is different. You're going to be in this thing for years. You're going to have other people occupying it, doing what other people do in this property. It's a different consideration for what you're going to deal with, what you're going to be owning further on down the road, and how you are going to be tied to the economic.
Now, I will tell you, there are pockets in these small towns where rentals are good, right? So when where you're renting the teachers and people to the prison system and people that are working for the government, there are pockets there. I just happen to have chosen one on a bad street where it kind of drove, high tenant turnover, if that makes sense. Not only that, the asset was an older asset. And some of these older buildings, if they're not properly insulated, like newer windows or, with insulation, you've got insulation, like they will make it unaffordable for the tenant. And then you'll get tenant turnover during the winter time.
Because
Like-
of utility costs.
Because of the
That
utility
the
costs.
tenant pays.
Exactly.
Once again, a consideration we don't really have for the.
You don't have that here.
I don't know, this house is, I bought a cabin, but the whole back wall full of windows. Not really my issue if that relates and correlates to incredibly high heating bills in December. If somebody wants to buy it, they can do their own research, they can figure it out. But when it's your building and you're renting it year over year, and you can't keep a tenant in it because the utilities are $800.
And that was the main thing. Like I own another house there and I own a free and clear, and literally it's a 16 cash on cash return, which will go into numbers, right? And it's a small little footprint. It's affordable. People have been there forever. They feel like it's their home. It works out well. There's no neighbor, it's not a multifamily property. So there isn't a neighbor above them or to the side of them. It feels like it's their house, right? And it's affordable. So that's another consideration.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right, so just kind of the considerations for you as the investor, person who's going to be spending money on something to hopefully make money with it, to think about. How much free cash do you have? Because it takes a different amount of cash to buy and hold and own for the long term than it does to fix and flip. We can fix and flip with 100% other people's money. Not necessarily always as easy in a buy and hold. You typically are going to need some equity in this property to own it for the long term, unless you partnered with someone else, and that's always possible.
Can I make that real
Yeah.
fast? When you buy a house for a rental property, you have to look at it like it's a business. Think of it that way, right? It's a business, and every business needs to have a certain amount of reserves, cash reserves. Normally, what we do in our business is at least 4 months of cash reserves for whatever the expenses are for that particular business. It would be the same thing with this particular house. So if your expense, you just have to say, okay, what are my expenses if this thing was to go unrented for a period of time, or what are my expenses just to keep this asset going? And then you would have 3 to 4 months of reserves, as any business owner would, to protect themselves. So you do need additional cash in reserve for a rental property.
That's, most lenders will require you to show that in the beginning, right? Like that comes up.
For maintenance or?
Both.
Both. Both. So long-term strategy for real estate investing, you're looking for income cash for both. You're looking for big chunks of money. Obviously, as we said, this is not the way to do it. That's fix and flip. This is kind of a long game strategy. Your tolerance for risk is obviously going to be vastly different for something that you're connected to for 3 to 6 months versus something you could be connected to for 4 years. This is actually a really good time to be talking about this. Case in point, Miami. What might be the near-term consequence for what was at one point a wonderful rental market for buildings of a certain vintage, built around a certain time with whatever certifications may or may not exist for these things. I've just read a story that another building down there a couple of days ago was forcefully vacated because it didn't have some kind of certificate for structural safety, right? Those are risks that you will take on being a long-term owner of a property versus one that's in and out in 3 to 6 months. So consider your own personal risk tolerance and then how you can mitigate that. There are several ways that you can mitigate risk for things. Again, not an accountant, not an attorney, but things like entity ownership, owning properties in the name of an LLC instead of yourself personally, double, triple, umbrella insuring absolutely everything all of the time with various different layers of insurance. Talk to an attorney about entity ownership, talk to your insurance guy about how to insure both the property and yourself and a portfolio and your broader personal self. And just look into the risk mitigation that you might need to know for a rental property versus a fix and flip.
Yeah, I mean, we in an ideal world, the attorney is going to tell you every single one of those assets should be held in its own, separate entity, its own LLC. And then you would want to have not only your insurance, but you would also have some kind of not builder's risk, but umbrella policy on top of that. And that's what we've done with all of our, actually, we own multiple properties in one in one LLC. And we've spread them out. So it's not one for one, but an attorney would tell you the safest would be one for one.
Good time for a pitch for the Facebook group. If you're not already members of the Grid Investor Network Facebook group, different from a Facebook page, right? It's a group. You have to apply to get in. We have to physically let you in. That means we can physically remove you if you get spammy. That's why we do that. It's so that the conversations stay directed and on topic the way that they should be in a healthy community, which it is. So if anyone's got a good attorney to talk about how to set up LLCs, to discuss things like Wyoming and Delaware LLCs that provide anonymity protection as well as the limited liability protections, those kind of things, that's a great resource where you can share that or ask for it if that's something that you're looking for in that closed Facebook group, Grid Investor Network. Find us under your Facebook groups. So we're talking about where, how long you intend to be investing if you're going to retire in 2 years and want to be completely liquid and all in cash. Rental property, maybe not the thing for you. Bitcoin, just put it all in Bitcoin. You're gonna
No, don't do that.
Definitely not a financial advisor, by the way. But this, again, this is a longer term deal. Management is a key consideration. Everybody thinks they can probably, not everybody, as certain people know, they have nothing to do with managing property. Some people figure, well, I can do it, and of course you can. Just understand what property management is. It's not just one day opening the door, letting somebody in there, and then just sit back and raking in checks. And stuff breaks. People have expectations. They want things fixed and repaired in a certain period of time. They may not always pay exactly on time. There are things that will need to be managed, and you can either pay someone else to do it, we're talking about in a second, or you can do it yourself. But know what it will cost if you're not going to do it yourself. Know what it will cost you in time if you're going to do it. Rate of return. What are you getting on other investments? We'll show you in a second what rate of return might look like for an investment property. And then what rate of appreciation are you expecting from real estate? I don't know that those are really huge considerations because, again, if it's making me income, I don't necessarily, to me, appreciation is a bonus. Depreciation and the tax benefits of owning real estate, bonus. If it makes income, that's usually enough. But if you're concerned about rate of appreciation, then it comes back to, again, areas, economics, population.
Yeah. The rate of appreciation in Northern Virginia is going to be different than the rate of appreciation in Buffalo, right? And so you'll have to factor that in when you're buying. Right? So one thing I was going to say, great book. We probably don't reference this, but in here. But before I forget, it's called Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright. It's a great book on taxes, right? On reducing your taxable income. One of the things that I love about buying and holding real estate long term is that it reduces my overall tax liability. While my net worth goes up, and even if my earned income is high, I can actually reduce that earned income and show a loss on these properties, even though I've made a gain, which helps me save money in taxes. It's called Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright, right? So it's one of the many benefits of owning long-term real estate, as opposed to fixing and flipping. You'll be a dealer, you'll get taxed at earned income rates, right? Which is just a job. That's a job, right? What we want to do is we want to flip that income to the passive income side, and so that you actually reduce your taxable net income, right? And you get to create a nice revenue stream for the rest of your life. Anybody have any questions on here before we go on to the next slide? Okay. So by the way, feel free to interject at any point, right? So Mark.
So I say prefer, it's because that's how the numbers tend to work. That's when these become usually good income properties, or in working class, just good old fashioned regular neighborhood. I would love to own rental property in the best downtown neighborhoods in the world, but it's already hard enough to find properties where the numbers make sense, much less a house like in this area that, say, a single family house in most everybody probably is from around here, although online we get other people McLean is a great neighborhood here in Northern Virginia, right? So let's say a home is worth $1 million in McLean, which is not at all the high end of that market, right? A lower end home is worth $1 million. It's still going to rent for a maximum though of 3,500
or $1,000 a month.
4,000, totally renovated. A $3 million house, you might get $5,000, $6,000 a month. A $10 million house, you still will not rent for any more than like $7,000, $8,000 a month. Those numbers don't support the mortgage that you would need at regular leverage to own that property. And even if you had a spare $3 million just to put in one house anyway, the return is terrible at those few $1,000. So the economics don't make sense for luxury real estate to be rented on a monthly basis. Topic for another night, short-term rental, vacation rental.
Yeah.
There
Entertainment,
are
yeah,
opportunities.
yeah, there's opportunities there, but that's
A different thing. For a traditional income property, what you would think rented to one person at one time for an entire year, luxury property doesn't typically work.
Yeah.
At the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the story that you just told.
Yeah.
Because it's in a cheap neighborhood doesn't mean it's going to make sense. Because the tenants that you will attract to that property, no matter where their rent is coming from, will probably treat your property a little bit worse, differently than a well-maintained
road, just that's what. Now, it's one of the challenges that we have right now in the talk and all the municipalities that here in the DMV areas is workforce housing. Like we need more of it, right? We need it, right? And by the way, those are what you call like working class neighborhoods. That's what that is. It goes to teachers and firefighters and police officers. Like these are great bread and butter homes. That's what we're talking about. That's that mid-market, right? And it's been a challenge. This is why this is such a big topic of conversation right now. I mean, there are government entities that will throw money at you for workforce housing, right? To build more of it. That's another topic of conversation. But that's what we find where the numbers make the most sense. Now in this market, we've had a crazy run up, right? So it's like it's hard to make those numbers work. But can you find deals every day? Sure. You heard Jad, he bought four this past month, right? Well, this past week, I think he said. So he bought in Marshall, Front Road, where was it? Middleburg.
Frederick, Annapolis.
That's right.
I heard. So, yep.
So there's pockets, right, where you could find.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So, and then what you do to fix up a house for rent slightly different than for sale. We're not interested in being slumlord. Let stuff stay broken, but I don't necessarily gut renovate the kitchen and bathroom of a house that's going to be renovated. I run a renovation company. Surprise, surprise! I don't think anyone would be surprised. You don't get 100% of your money back typically paying retail for renovations that you immediately put on the market for sale. Right? It's not super easy to do unless the house is completely destroyed or you're in a pocket where it's dated enough that adding all new adds a ton of value. Rental though, rarely do we find that it makes much sense to completely get renovate things. So we're typically fixing what's broken. If the cabinets are in good shape and they're hanging on the wall, they're just the wrong color, we can paint those. We can put new hardware on.
New hardware,
lighting,
and painting on cabinets, and new lights, and new paint, and maybe redoing some flooring and carpet. You could polish what we call polish the penny and get that property rented ASAP. You're in and out super fast, and you'll command great rent without breaking the bank. Right.
And if you do need to replace things, we're going to the restore or a used appliance place. You can find people selling cabinets on Craigslist. We do it when we're renovating a house. We don't have anywhere else for them to go. Put the whole cabinet set out on Craigslist, a couple $100. You can get your whole place.
Facebook Marketplace.
Right, great place. So we're just thinking previously used.
Well, here's the problem we have in Shenandoah. It's got a great kitchen with great appliances. Where we want to put in all new high-end stuff. What are we going to do with that stuff?
So you're going to put it on Facebook Marketplace.
Facebook Marketplace.
So
Either that or put it into one of our rentals.
you can
Right.
save a significant amount of money that
Yeah.
way and still be fine in your market. Although obviously, like anything else, comps, do your own comp research, right? Find out what things are rented for, what kind of condition they're in. If you're in a market or a neighborhood that requires a certain level of finish, your
Yeah.
mileage may vary on what you gotta do.
Property management.
Property management, do you do it? Do you use property management?
I do.
Why?
I do. Because my time is more valuable than, so when I first started, my wife and I managed all of our own properties. In fact, at one point we managed over 300 properties, which was a combination of ours plus investor properties. And that's when we ran it as a business. We sold the property management business. We continued renting our own properties. But one day I realized I'm busy. I'm a busy executive. Like I don't have time to be getting a text about like, hey, my stove isn't working, because that's going to cost me money.
Running background checks,
Oh, yeah.
taking in multiple
Yeah.
applications, meeting prospective tenants on a second walker, doing the checkouts when a tenant leaves, doing a property inspection when a tenant leaves, doing a property inspection mid-year while the tenant is there to make sure that the filters are being changed and that the toilet's not clogged and pouring all over the bathroom floor. There are plenty of things to do that
Here's,
a good property manager will do.
I think a good analogy would be this, right? Like if you're a doctor and you see a patient, that's worth a certain amount of money to you as a doctor. But if you're that same doctor and you tell the patient, hey, I can't tend to you right now because I need to go run a screening for one of my properties, that's a low dollar productive activity for that doctor. That doctor just needs to outsource it to somebody who that's all that they do, so that they can go meet another, patient. And that's what happens after a while in this business. I'm like, what's more productive to me is to talk to a buyer, a seller, or an agent. And I need Thomas, who runs our property management division, to essentially deal with all that, because that's his business. And he knows it better than I do now. So Thomas, please deal with this call because I don't have time, right?
So it'll cost you between 8 and 10% of your monthly rent.
Still,
But it will get you back time that hopefully is worth vastly more than whatever 8 to 10% of your rent is, that you hopefully turn into time of property. If you have nothing better to do, use that free time to go and network and find another. So,
loan consideration.
financial stuff. Typically, the loans you're getting on rental properties are 75% loan to value, loan to the appraised value of the property, right? So just know that whatever you think it might be worth is not as relevant as what an appraiser and your lender thinks the property is worth. So keep an eye on that. You will probably get 75% of that for your first couple of projects. If you go to a bank you've never worked with before, which we always recommend smaller local banks, by the way, for all of these types of things, you'll get about 75% leverage. That means you need to come up to 25% down. Really easy math. 25%.
On that, is that flexible at all, but lender to lender, or is that
Completely.
like a Fannie type of thing, or is?
It is dependent entirely on your credit rating, your relationship with that lender, and your ability to present the opportunity to that lender. There are all kinds of programs. I've heard people buying with only 5% down for rental property. Depending on how you choose to classify this property, if you classify it as a second home,
Right.
different.
Not Fannie.
I'm sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
Different programs outside of Fannie. Fannie and Freddie is typically a 75% max
Yeah,
LTV.
very vanilla, right? Very.
Anything more than 75% of Fannie Freddie for a non-owner
I
occupied.
could go near this stuff, my line.
You got it.
I just.
Mike, you had a question? Okay. You were just flexing your muscles?
Right.
So what you're doing?
That's what's typical. And actually, I don't know if the 10 property rule is still in place either, but that's another Fannie Freddie rule that once you get past 10.
Well, you could put 10 in your name and you could put 10 in your spouse's name,
Mhm.
right? So you can have a total of 20.
Mhm.
Right. So what you don't want to do is put them, you buy a property and you're both on there. You want to have it so you're on there, she's on there, so you can actually accumulate more. Basic strategy.
But the cheapest, easiest to get, longest term loans, 30-year loan at the lowest amount of down payment at the lowest interest rate will be typically a conforming loan, of which you usually have 10 in one name, and the lender will want to see it owned in the name of the borrower, as opposed to the LLC, which is what we were mentioning earlier. So again, not attorneys, but what you need to look up is what's called the due on sale clause and what implication that may have if you choose to later move a property from a personal name into an LLC.
Yeah.
Or find a way to finance those properties up front in the LLC without buying them personally. That just means it's not going to be a typical conforming Fannie Freddie 30-year cheapest possible loan, but there are lenders out there that do it. Go to the Facebook group and ask around who's got a good lender that lends for rental property, and you'll find.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course, we can never make guarantees on anything, but if the lender is getting their payment, they're not traditionally have not called that due on sale clause. So you see people always moving this investment property that's in their name into an LLC, right? But here's the issue: you've got to refinance that asset. The lender is going to ask you, if you want to refinance that asset, they're going to ask you to take it out of that, right, LLC. So you got to make sure that you're going to be putting it into the LLC when you're completely done with whatever financing you're putting on the property. That make sense?
The BRRRR method, right? Buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat.
Yeah.
But that refinance.
That refinance part, you want to make sure, because I made a mistake a long time ago where I put it into an LLC, then I wanted to refi a couple years later, and they made me take it out, which means I have to pay, you know, a settlement company to take it out, transfer it back into my name, and then I got to refinance, and then I put it back in, so that it, you know, was a pain in the ass.
And there's risk exposure there for
Yeah.
whatever that time period is. So again, that's why we're not giving out financial advice. And if you've got people that you recommend that do that kind of thing and set those up, everyone's always interested in how to get better at setting those up. So talk about financials and our typical deal. I don't know if the guys here in the room can see, but just the basic outline of what you might see in this area, and think to yourself, okay, this is something I can buy and rent out, right?
Man, I think people would be dying for $250,000 townhouse today. They're like,
There are certain neighborhoods where those exist. You can still find a
Tough.
$250,000 townhouse where we are in Virginia.
somebody just
Uh,
chatted. Let's see.
It's probably gonna need some work on. Oh, well, Herndon, there are parts of Herndon still where you can.
I don't think so, man. I don't
They're
think
not
so.
gonna be in great shape. I'm saying these are houses that are gonna need a little bit of work. But Dumfries also, Dumfries, Lorton here in Virginia, Centerville every once in a while, Manassas Park.
Got to go to Winchester.
The farther out you go, the easier it gets, right? But still within Fairfax County, there are a couple of areas, neighborhoods, we say areas, neighborhoods that still have that product available. Occasionally, not all the time. Again, I'm saying this is a deal. We'll run the numbers on it. But yeah, we're not looking to pick these up on the open market at these prices.
So the open wrote with the recent changes to Fannie and Freddie moving away from investment, because yes, it's more expensive now.
Yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up. We recently launched a portfolio loan to fill the gap for well-qualified folks that can do a 10% down investment purchase, no mortgage insurance, no MI, 1 to 4 unit, title in the individual name, full doc underwrite, grab time on his Calendly. It's awesome. This is why, you know, powers in the network, there are different programs, and especially now because lenders are loosening things up a little bit.
Yep.
Right. So great
Good time
stuff.
to mention, by the way, everybody who is online, is looking at that chat box in the bottom right-hand corner. You click on the 3 dots, you can save the chat. So you
can save the chat.
later,
Yeah.
and pick up those names. Otherwise, if anybody wants to know, follow up with us, we can get all that information to you.
So is this a good deal or
So
not?
is this a deal? A $250,000 townhouse, these $10,000 in work, it's gonna rent for $17.50 a month, $75 a month HOA, pretty typical homeowner fee for a townhouse in our area. Tenant's gonna pay the utilities, that's pretty standard. Landlord's gonna pay the real estate taxes. I'm saying that's about $4,000 a year. And the landlord's gonna need insurance, about $100 a month for a good.
That's
landlord
expensive
policy.
insurance, but yeah.
It's overinsured. That make any sense?
Okay.
SDP, Federal Savings Bank. There you go.
Cool.
I'm not knocking the Bank of Americas of the world, but it's typically not where you're going to find flexible terms. It's in the big brick and mortars. So Our assumptions then on this deal, we're gonna get that 75% LTV loan, 5% 30-year mortgage.
That's expensive these days.
Rates have ticked up, dude, if you look.
Where are we right now? Where are we with rates?
You know, we'll let him see what he's quoting right now.
5% on an investment
Rates on
loan.
investment.
Okay. Big
Uh,
change.
So I'm going to assume that there is going to be some amount of lost rent during the turnover. Not necessarily always the case, but we don't assume that everything's always going to work. We assume that if a tenant moves out, it's going to take me some amount of time to either clean the place up, put it on the market, get another person in there, whatever. So I'm going to just say $1,000 is what I'll lose on that, and $1,000 in repairs. Who knows? If the AC goes out, it's going to be more than minimally. You usually need to paint or carpet a place when you do a turnover. So you're going to have a couple bucks go out for that. And then, as we were saying, depreciation on taxes and loan payoffs and all those things are financial factors. They don't impact the income from the property. So my tax bracket.
There you go, Mark. You want that up or off?
475.
4.7. Yeah.
So
Man, I locked in 3.2 last year on an investment property. Just goes to show you.
5% is not bad either, by the way. 4.75 a point nets out to about 5.
Yeah.
And that's not bad if the deal still make money. You can make money at a 13% rate. It's just going to be a little bit harder. Hopefully, we won't have to do that.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk to me in 10 years. So depreciation really is not being counted here. All right, next one. So those are our assumptions. So how does this deal play out? You're going to need about $70,000 in equity. That's your 25% down, right? So you've got to come up with that somewhere. Pillow, IRA, self-directed,
Bitcoin.
cash in, whatever. Your monthly cost then $1,000 a month for that mortgage that we just talked about. $400 a month to cover your taxes. $100 a month to cover insurance. $75 a month HOA. It's going to cost me $1,575 to own the house. Okay, so far so good though. I'm paying $1,750. I'm at $1,575. That's $18,900 a year, not including property. So I did all of my own management. $18,900 is what I'd collect at the end of the year. If you included an 8% property management fee, that adds another $126 a month, bringing you to about $1,500 a year in property management, or $20,400 total ownership cost, right, with a property management. You have a question there?
I do.
Or you can just buy it all cash and just refinance out of it and do the BRR method.
Can do, but either way, you end up with debt.
You need debt
so
on it.
You end up with debt. This is kind of how the debt will end up looking. All right, so with that breakdown, $1,750 a month, $21,000 a year, minus the $2,000 that we're going to lose cleaning it up, getting another person put into the property, means you have an actual net income of $19,000, meaning you lose about $1,000 a year on those numbers as I just ran them. All right, so let's say you're gonna say, all right, you know what? Fine. It's gonna be good. Nothing's gonna break. Tenant's never gonna leave. I'm gonna manage it myself. Save all I know. I'm not gonna lose those $2,000. I'm not gonna pay some other dude a couple grand a year to run it for me. Fine. In that case, you're gonna make $2,000 a year or 2.8% on your $70,000. Good, bad? I don't know. If you bought Bitcoin a couple of months ago, you would say 2.8% a year, maybe not good enough for all the other things that go along with self-managing a rental property that you have to hope doesn't have any kind of problem.
I just want to make sure you're speaking.
So now let's say, okay, well, to Jad's point, you know what? I need a loan. I'm rich. I can buy this $250,000 property in cash, and then I don't have to worry about all these loan costs and all this interest and all this other stuff. Great. You buy it all in cash. You're going to make about $14,000 a year, or 5.6% on your $250,000. Is that a good return? Maybe, but you should at least know what the returns are. Leverage helps, but leverage costs money. You may get lucky and not have anything ever break or a tenant ever leave. Would I count on it? No, I'd rather count on trying to buy a property that actually produces income in the now, which means this one that rents for $1,750 a month. I'm trying to buy it something closer to $200,000 instead of $250,000.
Got to get the interest rate a little bit. This is all about squeezing a little from here, a little from there, making sure that I'm getting, my interest rate a little bit lower, making sure I'm buying it a little bit lower. creating arbitrage in that by knowing the game, right?
And by the way, this is a good time to mention one of the best ways that we have for reducing that turnover cost of tenant leaving and us having to go in and paint the carpet and make repairs and things is to not overcharge to begin with.
Yeah.
Come in, if the average market rent in this neighborhood is $17.50, you probably would do yourself a favor by renting it like $16.
This is a pro tip because the majority of where you lose money is in tenant turnover. And the rental market is, right? So people leave for $50 a month.
Right.
So I often see new investors trying to get the maximum rent in a neighborhood when their thinking should be, now let me see if I can rent it slightly below, because what I want to do is I want people to stay long term. So in our Herndon properties, we've kept people somewhere between $50 to $100 less than the market. And we've had people in there for 13, 14 years, just haven't left.
And
Right?
what's your average? What do you think your average length of tenancy is?
Yeah, I mean, the average is like 9 years.
It's almost 10, right?
Yeah.
10 years with nothing but when things really do break, you maintain it. But in 10 years, you're not having to go in and regularly paint and put in new carpet until it's getting, to the point where the tenant says, hey, I really like it to look a little bit.
Yeah.
Excuse
no,
me?
so-
They'll let you know.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question. So so you're talking about like in the beginning, if you can lower your rent a little bit as compared to the competitors and or the market, then you can easily rent your property. But what about every year? Did you raise the rent every year? And
Yes.
I have another question about states which are landlord friendly and which are not, and all those rules and regulations.
So the
so if
answer
you
is, yeah, so to answer the question, we always raise the rent, but we don't blindly raise the rent, right? Some people will say, oh, I'm going to naturally include this rental increase. What I do is I pull the comps and I say, okay, what's happened to rents in the last year? What's happened to rents in the last 2 years? And then if they've increased, I just make sure that I keep lockstep increase and show the tenant, listen, hey, the average rent for your place is $1,900, but I've got you at $1,800 because you've been a great tenant. So we're to go from $1,725 to $1,800, knowing that the full market rent is $1,900. So they're like, okay, thank you, right? So I keep raising it on them, but just slightly below, right, the rest of the market. Yes, there are Virginia, in my opinion, is a friendlier landlord state than, let's say, DC or Maryland, especially DC. But if you know the rules and the games in those markets, it should not discourage you. If you learn the rules in those markets, you could do very well, right? But DC does have a different layer of complexity to it. And if you're not careful, you can take a massive bath in DC, right? And by the way, there are professional landlords out there. I mean, professional tenants that will take advantage of an inexperienced landlord. They know the rules better than you do, and they know how to stay in those properties for extended periods of time, right?
How might you have discovered that is the kind of thing that someone gets into periodically?
Well, you look at credit checks, background checks.
Yeah, who does that for you?
Yeah, property management.
Property management. So
Yeah.
yes, you can, by the way, get credit and background checks on your own, Mr. Landlord, or other services out there to do it. But I'd much prefer to have a property manager, again, do that work, do some background, get some landlord references, check those references, and check and see what this person's previous experience has been. Because to your point, there are professional tenants out there who can make your life a little more difficult. The short answer on difficulty, though, I measure in time to eviction. And of the 3 jurisdictions in our area, Maryland, DC, and Virginia, Virginia has the shortest time to eviction, usually with a provable claim of non-payment of rent. It's 60 to 90 days in Virginia. Double that in Maryland, DC.
Throw in COVID.
Oh, so that's in a normal year.
Yeah.
Right now, there's an eviction moratorium, by the way, going on at least to the end of July, possibly beyond that. But there are also programs in place where if you are an effective landlord, you can apply for certain grants.
And that takes a long time. I mean, we applied months ago and have not received anything.
And the person who is best able to follow that paperwork for you again, property manager. So again, their fees usually are made up for when things go sideways.
So some final thoughts on
Yep.
this.
So we're talking about individual properties here, right? That we buy over time and play the long game to build wealth over time. You don't have to just buy individual properties, right? There
Yep.
are multi-unit properties out there for sale where the numbers can work very much the same. You just times how many units you have. The advantage being, though, when you make a wholesale repair to or an improvement to a multi-unit building, you're spreading it out over multiple units. You increase value. You increase value to all the units at the same time. Laundry repairs or major roof repair or new windows, the things that you do to increase the value of a larger unit property tend to have a compounding effect on income.
And let me just, for units, we referred to it a couple times, from 1 to 4, right? 4 is still considered residential. Anything above 4 is now considered commercial, right? So the type of loan that you're going to get on it is a commercial loan, which is going to be slightly more expensive, which normally is amortized over 20 years and might only be locked in for a period of 5 years, right? And so there sometimes carries a little bit more fluctuations and risk that's there. But you know what people like about multifamily properties is that it's all in one roof, like all under one roof, right? But it has its own sets of challenges, right? Sometimes tenants don't get along with each other. Sometimes the tenant upstairs is like, hey, you know, like, or the tenant downstairs is like, the tenant upstairs is making all this noise, right? So there's can be discord that's there. Operating costs on a multifamily property is typically about 40%, 35 to 40%. So that means, what does it cost to run that business? Think of it that way, is a cost of around 40%. Some landlords can get it down if they're self-managing to like 25%, right? That hasn't, normally if I see somebody may bring me a P&L and it shows that their expenses are only 25%, I don't trust those numbers, right? I know the cost because I own a multifamily property. I just know they're more expensive to run. Many of them, you got to make sure that they are subdivided. Now, this isn't a multifamily class. I'm not going to go into details, but just give you some tips right now. Most of them are subdivided, like the electric and the gas will be subdivided, but the water isn't. You got to make sure that they are subdivided because there are some old buildings out there where people will sell them as multifamily properties, but they're still electric and gas and water are still the liability of the owner. So they try to bake it into the rents, and it's like, you know, it's a total crap show, right?
Yeah.
So we want
control.
you don't have control.
So the other thing that on this slide, if you're looking for a rule of thumb, you want to know whether to answer the phone or respond to the emails and hey, I got a sweet rental deal, 100 times a month. What we're talking about, single family houses, typical leverage that you're going to get on the loan, the typical HOA fees for the month that you'll pay around here, and all the other rigmarole that I went through before. If your rents for $1,800 a month, 1,800 times 100, 180,000. We give you 180,000 more. They hang up, fine. Wait till the next call comes through. They say,
I know that's a deal at that point.
I got to at least 100 money. You're even around the ballpark, 100x the monthly rent. Take the call, return the email, do some deeper due diligence.
Now that is market specific. That is here in this area, right? Because you'll go to places like Cumberland and it's more like 250 times the monthly rent, right? So.
Well, nothing's worth it if it's a bad building with bad tenants, right? But does that work in Durham, North Carolina? If you can rent the house for $600 a month and you can buy it for $60, I don't know, maybe, but it's at least worth taking the call and looking into 100x in the typical. That's typical. There are HOAs that are vastly higher and lower than others that are kind of hard to balance out.
So here's the problem, right? Because this is so true. Like, a deal that's a good cash flow as a rental in this market is typically also a good fix and flip. So what is the tendency that most people have?
Yeah, you're leaving 6 figures of equity and it's.
They're like, I want
it's not-
those 6 figures in my pocket. So they take the money today, right? And then what happens is 10 years later, they go, damn, what did I do with that $100,000? I wish I still owned that property because that property that I bought for 300 is now worth 900, right? Some stupid number, right? So, I mean, we had that, we bought a single family house on a 1/4 acre lot in McLean in 2002 for $325,000. I was young. I was like, that seemed like so much money to me at the time. Interest rate were like 6.5. You know, and today there's a $2 million home that sits on that. We sold it a few years later. We took a couple $100,000, we put it in our pocket. And today you were like, Rob, where's that money? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know where it is. It's life, right? So I wish I held the asset. And by the way, it is one of the most, when I interview lots of investors all across the country and ask them, what's your biggest regret in this business? Typically, it's a combination. I didn't start sooner and I didn't hold enough, right? So I didn't start sooner, I didn't hold enough.
And the other point is that we have to be opportunistic for these, right? To buy property at 100x the monthly rent is not something you're going to just go into your average neighborhood and find. You have to do the other things that we talked about earlier on in the year, right? Or the 3 pillars for how to find a deal, how to build a network, how to build a drinking, all the things that we do. And the reason that we run this is that we hopefully meet as many people as possible so that if they have something that comes up that maybe makes sense, we'll hopefully find out about it. You should be doing the same.
Yeah, this is part of our lead generation strategy, right? Which is part of your lead generation strategy. You just need to be meeting lots of people, putting them into your database, and then telling everybody what you're looking for. It's that simple. Tell people what you want, and what you want shows up. That's how it works. It's not more complicated than that. But you need to know what a good deal looks like. So that's why we run through these numbers. So you need to go into the MLS, you need to dig into those numbers, you got to talk to investors. And then when something opportunity does arise, you got to strike when the iron's hot. That's how it works. So knowing what a good deal is the start. And then it's taking action to make sure that you're finding those or putting the word out so that you can start building your family's portfolio, your portfolio. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Well, we wrap this up. Well, we're going to do a little private mastermind group here with the people that showed up, because we want to make sure that we're bringing, value to people that are showing up in the room. We want to bring people back into the room. Well, I love doing Zoom and we'll always do it. I feel that the real learning collaboration happens with just like these little breakout sessions when people start getting to meet each other. And just to give you guys perspective, the way this was operated before COVID, we'd have 50, 60, 100 people in the room, right?
Not this room. We're also
Not
in the
this
middle
room.
of an office group, so we're trying to figure out how to actually get things set up and people in and working. But yeah, the
Our
preference would be-
downstairs, we would have, 60 to 100 people in the room, and everybody's exchanging business cards and talking about where they're buying and where they're selling or which contractor they need. And we will get back to that, right?
So for next month,
Here,
our plan to do is here. We'll work on things like door locks, maybe get the AC turned down a little if it's 95 degrees that day. We'll start smoothing out the kinks and stuff as we start bringing this thing back into the room. But honestly, that really is where the majority of the benefit from an event like this comes from. Hanging out, chatting, talking about what you want to get into in real estate investing, and then making deals out.
cool. So anybody just throw in the chat any questions before we sign off, right? Will Grid offer a course on investing in multifamily units as an investment strategy in the future? Yes, Erica, we absolutely will. We have a good friend of mine that we bring in that owns a lot of multifamily property. We're going to collaborate with him and we'll actually have a course. In fact, if you go to gridinvestor.com, there is a marketplace section that we're starting to put courses in on the back end, courses that, we're only going to bring in stuff that we actually know how to do. So for instance, Mark has analyzed thousands of properties in the last 20 years. So he has an awesome deal analysis course in the back end of our Grid platform. If you want to learn the numbers and get the spreadsheets, the course is there, right? We'll do the same thing for single family fix and flip, multifamily buy and holds, Airbnbs. So whatever anybody's topic of interest is, we'll have it in there. Give us about a year or so to complete everything on the back end, but it'll be there. So,
Hi, I had a question.
sure, fire away.
Yes, I'm a new investor, and I was wondering, like, how did you deal with the moratorium, the rental moratorium? How did you deal with tenants who weren't paying?
So we, with compassion, right? That was the number one, compassion. And then luckily we had reserves, and I had, we never, there was lots of landlords out there that they just stopped paying as well, right? Because the government, and not the government, but what is it? The banks allowed you to take the deferral, right? But we never took it. We just had reserves. And luckily enough, 80% of our tenants continued paying. The 20% that didn't, we're working with them right now. So, right. I do have one building in particular, it's 3 units, and nobody's paid in 18 months. Right. And so you need some cash.
And getting back to that longer term risk of being in this business, that is part of it. And that is yet another reason why you should be trying to accumulate properties that produce income that, oh, by the way, you can save some, right? You don't have to spend it all. Build up some reserves to cover things when they happen, right? Treat this like a business. Don't strip your business of all of its money.
So what we have done is we worked with some tenants that fell behind, and we just worked with them. Hey, what can you pay now? What can you pay later? And then we've also gone in and we've applied at the local level to get back rent for this one tenant that, she's probably like 9 months behind. The issue is, she's 9 months behind. She's still in the house. The only way that we actually get the money is if she stays in the house and we don't evict her. So it's this kind of weird catch-22 because, yes, we want the money, but then will she be able to pay in the future? We're trying to figure that piece out. But luckily enough, we had some reserves in order to weather that storm.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
In the Facebook button.
Yeah, we'll have our property manager post a little bit about how to make application if anybody on here has tenants that haven't paid. We're going through that process right now. We haven't received any money, so I can't say yes, claimed victory, we got cash. Getting the EIDL and the PPP loan was significantly easier than it has been to get this. I will say that. So.
All right, thanks so much.
Sure, my pleasure. And guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Again, hit the 3 buttons, save the chat. There's probably plenty we couldn't cover in a couple hour here tonight. So drop us an email, phone call, reach out, like to chat.
And
Online or off.
And go to greatinvestor.com and you can get access to some of, if you go to the courses section, you can see some of the things that we're starting to build back there. So guys, make it a great night. Thanks so much for joining. Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.